So, 2005 Pontiac Vibe. Was gonna turn the car on and check this wheel, and then I found that it does this. I don't have to check it. It's gonna fall off. Okay, bearing. It's Mike here. Gonna do an update because I've been forgetting to do my video stuff I was gonna do. This Vibe thing, that wheel I showed you, see, this is the Vibe, my wife's car. The wheel was wobbly, so I got a bearing, and I read up on a forum, and they said that these press bearings you cannot do without the proper tools. So that to me is just a challenge. I got the bearing out. I don't know if you can see it all over there. It kind of came out in a glorious manner. Used a socket like this, a big one. I don't have a lot of specialty tools, but I have some basic tools. And then the one last piece is there was a collar, I don't know if you can see that or not, stuck still on here. So what I've done is I have taken my grinder and I've made it thin here and thin in this area here, if you can see that. And the idea now, which I will have to stop recording for, is I'm going to take my punch, my trusty chisel here, that guy, see if I can knock it. I want to make a split here now that I've made a thin spot, and then it should slip right off. And then it's just a matter of putting everything back together. Thanks. Bye. Okay, at this point I'm starting to run out of daylight, but I thought I would show you my high-end, I guess this would be the GM tool number whatever, but made by me. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not the same. Anyway, there's a piece of threaded rod, runs all the way through. I didn't have a nut for the one end, so I'm using a die, and I have a bar that goes across the end here to support. Then on the other end I have a nut, a washer, a great big socket that fit and jammed just inside the outside of the old bearing. Always keep your old bearings because you can usually make a press out of them. And then here's the new bearing going in. So I've just been turning, and then I give a little tap with the hammer, and then just keep repeating until it's in. The only thing I had to do was make sure I started it just by tapping around the outside and then getting it as square as I possibly could so that it wouldn't damage anything going together. So you do have to do that. I tapped it, got it started, made this up real quick. Kind of a good idea for all sorts of things you want to pull together. It's cost effective and multi-purpose, so that's handy. But yeah, I'm losing my light, and oddly I started this around noon and I have barely worked on it. So hope that's some good information, and I'll catch up with you here when I got something else to show you. Talk. Okay, so last on this Vibe, we were swapping out a bearing. Now I'm done, and I think what I was showing you is was the pressing in. So I'll start. I've got some tools laid out here that I used. This is the threaded rod with a nut, a couple of washers, and I had that. This is the old bearing outside, and this is a socket I basically used because it fit inside like so that at this end I could put the washers over to give myself something to lever on. And then I had this bar because it reached all the way across the one end, and I pulled it together. And this is a tool I use a lot. I was tapping with that at the same time so that it would just keep on going. I had some other sockets here. Mostly these are big one, half inch or whatever drive, or three, no, anyway, they're big sockets from when I used to be a tractor mechanic. they're handy for all sorts of stuff. They take a pretty good beating before they get hurt. They're just like a offshore brand. This is the wrench and socket that I used for the big center nut. 1 3/16 seemed to fit just fine and work just fine. Always good to have a screwdriver, a big, long, heavy one. I use that even for adjusting, or I can squeeze it in and pull the brake piston back in before I unbolt anything in behind. I'll have to show that one of these times, maybe on my Cavalier. I open up the brake fluid container a little bit, and then I can usually just pry back so that when I go to reassemble things, that piston's back out of the way, and it saves a heck of a lot of trouble if you do it first. Chisel, handy for knocking stuff apart. Variety of other sockets. I always just grab a handful pretty much, but this is all metric. Some sandpaper I used for cleaning up anything that was over rusty. I didn't over sand anything, I just cleaned it a little bit. I used this for threads on bolts and splines on shafts and whatever, to make sure there was no major big debris, so that when things are together. I did manage to hit with the hammer a couple of times a few spots that were where the bearing went, and being a pressed bearing, it's got to be pretty precision, and I prefer to use a file on that, because that way you're only taking off the high spots if you're careful, and not like with sandpaper where you can actually make detents around the high spot because it's not as straight and flat. What else do we have? Screwdriver, handy for trying to help pry out clips and doodads. Regular wrench, it's a 14, that's the one that holds the brake caliper onto the caliper mount. Little punch, the big nut in the middle has to have a little press in spot. It's a collar, you basically just, when it's tight, you just give it a little ding, and I actually had ground the end off of this to undo that ding. And if you ever take one apart or see what one of those main axle nuts look like, you kind of probably know what I mean. Another nice little screwdriver, just a flat old one, little baby pry bar. Clip pliers, and I think overall, I also used this, which is just a regular crowbar, but I've ground the end down so that it will grab in a little nicer, so that you can kind of hammer and pry on it at the same time. It's just like a really big chisel, so that's kind of fun. Extensions and all sorts of doodads. So that's that. I'm gonna put this together, hopefully it makes sense. I'm sorry I didn't get more detail in, and I can explain things otherwise if you have questions, but the Vibe press and bearing is definitely, if you got the knowledge, it's a do-it-yourself. I don't care what anybody says. The only thing maybe would be to have a mechanic that you know that could back you up if you did run into trouble, because that is the thing, especially if it was your only car. Once it's apart, and you don't go anywhere until it's back together. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.